Hey, what's up, everyone? Before we get started into this next episode, I want to give a quick shout out to Seth Roy of North Mountain Goshawks for being a continued supporter of the podcast. And for those of you that are still in the market for a new hunting partner for the upcoming season, particularly a parent-reared goshawk, I wouldn't wait too much longer to contact Seth. Most of the birds are already spoken for, and you don't want to wait too much longer. You're going to miss out. So hit him up at ostringer3@gmail.com. Fill out the information form at northmountaingoshawks.com or send him a message on Facebook at North Mountain Goshawks. Secure your hunting partner for next upcoming season and tell him we sent you. Now, on to the next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast. What's up, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, and we are switching gears, switching things up once again with this episode. And just to give you a little background on how this episode came to be, when I was down in Jersey recording the bulk of the Dachshund series, there were a couple of topics that continually came up amidst my new group of friends down there. And basically, after talking to several of them, and hearing their opinions and thoughts about a couple of the hot button issues, if you will, within our community, and they continually pop up. Sometimes they can even be a little bit polarizing, but anyway, after talking to these guys about these couple of topics, I kind of felt like it was a good idea, and they also felt like it was a good idea to go ahead and just kind of have somewhat of a panel or roundtable discussion and share thoughts and opinions about these particular subjects. And of course, we did it in as organized and constructive manner as possible. Not everyone agrees on these topics, and it was nice to be able to have another example of how it is possible to have a group of people come together and have a civil discussion and debate about different thoughts and viewpoints about something without everybody end up getting all heated and hating each other in the midst of it all. So anyway, the main things we decided to discuss were the use of social media within the falconry community, and also how our sponsorship system is set up here in the U.S. and, you know, some of the pros and cons involved with that, and whether or not you agree or disagree with many of the thoughts or viewpoints that are shared in this episode. I hope, if nothing else, you all take away that it is possible to come together, have a nice civil conversation about things that you don't agree on, and sometimes you can agree to disagree, and that's okay. So, at any rate, I think it's just going to be best if we go ahead and launch into this little roundtable discussion, debate, panel, whatever you want to call it, with myself, Paul, Casey, Eric, and Pack. And so I hope you all get something out of this conversation. If nothing else, it might be a little thought-provoking. I don't know. But anyway, this is something new, and hope you enjoy it. Here we go. After talking to all these cool falconers that I've met here over this past week in Jersey and the surrounding areas that have run Dachshunds and different things and flown different things, and you know, after talking to some of them, there's been kind of an overall desire. Some of them have kind of wanted to, you know, address some different topics that have been and still kind of are, in a lot of ways, hot button issues within the falconry community. And of course, you know, there's a wide varying range of opinions on a lot of these issues, or a lot of different issues, but we're going to kind of talk a little bit about a couple of these issues. And we've got like 4 other falconers here that, I don't know, we kind of wanted to see how this would go. It's a little bit of an experiment, but basically, this is the first time we will have had just kind of 4 falconers who, I mean, they know each other fairly well, been around each other, but also within this small group have varying thoughts, opinions, and feelings about some different issues and subjects within our falconry community. So that being said, this should be interesting. I don't know how well it's going to turn out, but hey, I'm always looking for ways to keep things kind of fresh and new and somewhat interesting. So that being said, we've got Eric, we got Pac, we've got Paul, we've got Casey, and we're going to see how bad we can screw this up. So first topic we're going to kind of discuss a little bit. Paul, I'm going to give you the first run at the podium, so to speak, here. And we'll go ahead and start off with the topic of Falconers' thoughts on the impact and implications of social media. And you go ahead and just start us off.
Sure. Thanks, John. Appreciate the opportunity here. It's definitely an interesting topic to talk about. Social media has, changed a lot of things in this world, and one of those is how falconers communicate and share their interests and share their lives. I think it was early on, starting in the late '90s with falconry. It was just we had emails and phone calls. So a lot of the way we shared falconry was through emails, writing up your journals, typing them out into emails, sending them out to other friends and falconers. And then those spread out to email list servers, right? So you had like Raptor Repertoire, and you'd get an email list server, and you'd see other people's emails, right? And everyone could share their emails. And then from there, it went on to some different types of forum groups. We had Yahoo groups was big for a while, and it was more of like an uncensored dumping of whatever you wanted to talk about. Some groups were well moderated, some are not. That's kind of what we have, a little bit of what we have today. NAFX grew from that area, and now you got all the other social media between TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. It's been interesting to see how it all has changed the way falconers share information. It's easier to understand and see what falconry is with just seeing a video of falconry, like a goshawk taking a duck. I mean, I remember, I think it was one of the falconers on California Paint posted a really beautiful video. I think it might have been even YouTube when it first started, and it was just like great to see a video like that. But there was always that question, especially with NAFA. I think there was even a policy at some point where they weren't posting pictures, or not to post pictures online of your bird on a kill. I know even with the New Jersey Falconry Club, there was, some board members of the club thought, the falconry website for the club shouldn't have pictures of your bird on game, right? And it was almost like, we don't want people to see what really happens out there, or it might offend the sensibilities of certain people. So I could see that it's both, there's both sides to that, right? I mean, it's out there. Do you want to maybe not offend people, or do you want to expose it enough that everybody understands what really falconry is, what hunting is, right? I mean, it's the same idea. The hunters want to post pictures with their deer or other kill, other game. I don't know, but anyway, that's just the start of it. A little bit of background of where it's gone, and social media in general has different motivations for different people, right? I mean, it motivates them to practice falconry a little bit harder. They share their lives out there, and they also share their falconry. So I've seen a number of falconers where everything they do is out there in social media. So when they do falconry, it goes along with it. And then other falconers spend, they keep most of their private life off of social media, but they have an account that promotes falconry and what they do in falconry. So it's a little bit on the opposite side of that. And then me personally, I use social media as a way to, for entertainment, to see other people's falconry, to learn, to understand what other people are doing for fun. And then I use it myself as a journal, right? Instead of sending my emails out to friends, I'll put an Instagram post, and my account's private. I only allow falconers or people that I know, or other people, to see my stuff, and I like to go back and see what happened over the years. And it's my personal journal that I share with other people, and other people have interest in it. So it's not a public forum, but anyway, so that's kind of like I'm just laying it out there the way I see social media go, and it's been used in a lot of ways to grow the sport, but it also opens itself up to other criticisms, and yeah, it's interesting. I don't know where it's going to go. I mean, I don't know.
Well, and so just to be clear on what your overall viewpoint is, I mean, I know your brother is completely anti and against it or whatever. I mean, I think you're still kind of somewhere in between, not necessarily for, not necessarily against, but you know, there's hopefully a I don't know, like a tasteful, I guess, way to go about it in your humble opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's still like, I mean, so any community, right? You have, especially newcomers are coming. The whole point of a community is that you maintain a certain set of standards that you can all agree on, that we all get along with. And so when people are doing things outside of a recognized standard or norm that we would expect, then the community attacks each other and pushes that person out, right?
Right.
That's kind of just that's human nature. That's society. That's how it works. So when it's with social media, you're getting that to like a magnified degree. So if an apprentice comes in and starts misbehaving or doing things that are what the majority of falconers think is inappropriate, they're going to get attacked. But they're not going to get attacked by like their sponsor. They're going to be attacked by everybody else that sees them. And so that could, you know, demoralize a person. It could make it very hard for them to feel accepted in that community, right? So, but the whole point of a community is that you maintain a certain standard, and that's generally acceptable. Right?
So yeah, basically your stance on it is as long as that standard is being maintained and policed and monitored within our own community, then you really don't have an issue with it. Yeah. Okay. Well, and that brings us then, I guess we can go ahead and shift to the next contestant on The Price is Right here. You know, who, as we all know, is very active on social media and obviously is very pro social media and stuff. But go ahead and swivel the mic over to yourself there, Casey, and you know, go ahead and share your thoughts here.
Yeah, I have a bunch of thoughts about it. I think that was very well said by Paul. He's very analytical and well-spoken, so it's very good. And I agree with everything he said. I really do. I think that it's come a long way. I think that the metaphorical genie is already out of the bottle. You know, people know about falconry. There's falconers that are on social media that are gaining attention, and it's you know, people like to get the attention. And they enjoy to post, and they see that there's different people that enjoy to watch their content, and they follow along with it. So it's fun to just share a part of your life, and especially a part of your life that's very very passion filled. Mm-hmm. But I do think there's a balance, and there is some things that I see that are just not a good representation of falconry to the general public, right? Mm-hmm. Because falconry, it's a hunting sport at its core. There's killing involved, and some people don't like to see that stuff. So, which is totally fine. My page, I have posted things when I was younger, maybe a little bit more brash, that maybe I would definitely not post now. That probably wasn't tasteful. It wasn't anything crazy, but it just doesn't give off the best vibe. So I think that posting and promoting the sport of falconry is, I think at this stage of the game, I think it's necessary to get in front of it, to get out in front of the sport and put forth a very good representation of what the sport is, which is a hunting sport where you're catching game and allowing your birds to feed on it. Just to address, you know, the various things that I've heard, some things that Paul has said, and that some of the clubs, we don't want a picture of our bird on game. That to me, that is like the most, don't take this the wrong way, but that is the most ignorant, foolish statement that any falconer, hunter, outdoorsman, bird watcher could ever say. Hey, let's not show what these birds do to live every single day. To me, that just makes no sense at all. Like, okay, so if you don't like in my mind, the argument that I have with myself, because it may not seem that way, I am introspective. I do ask myself, why do I post? What am I doing? And my sponsors confront me. They're kind of anti, you know what I mean? And they kind of like, what is it? The attention, and you're like this. And it's like, of course, there's a level of attention. It's not necessarily about me, because if I started posting videos of me walking around, I think all my followers should just disappear. Nobody cares about me. They want to see the birds do what they do. So my motivation is to show what these birds do every day in the wild, and I get to view it. And it's been, obviously, it's been a passion since I was a child, riding my bike to the field, bumming a ride from my brother to drop me off and trying to figure out a ride home. There was no social media. I didn't even have a cell phone. For me, I know the motivation is pure. And to be honest, if social media banned the sport of falconry outright on their platforms, I would probably take a big sigh of relief and say, okay, that's it. And now I can just hunt in peace and share our videos with each other. But another major part of the motivation, just to wrap up my long-winded statement, is there's people out there that are posting trash falconry, things that the public shouldn't be seeing, things that don't represent the sport correctly, poor husbandry, poor technique in the field. And if you're a newer person trying to trade your red tail off and it's footing you and you got a giant bath towel trying to hide the rabbit, and it's like this train wreck that's not for the general public to see. It's really not, because it just looks like this bizarre, terrible magic trick that is going extremely wrong, and the bird knows exactly what you're trying to do, and it's terrible. I'm not calling out anybody's name specifically. I just saw a video. So that's not proper falconry to be showing to the general public. That's a train wreck. Keep that to yourself. We're very happy for you. Keep practicing. I've been footed many times. I've had train wrecks. I have train wrecks to this day, every now and then when I'm not paying attention or in a rush. But I'm not necessarily going to post those. I do post some failures and some successes, but I try to do it in more of a tasteful way. And sometimes my content is a little bit more graphic than some people like. But so is Animal Planet, and so is National Geographic. Is a bird of prey catching a rabbit, is that a violent, terrible thing to see? No, in my opinion, that's nature. And if you have a problem with it, then you need to stop watching Disney. You need to start watching National Geographic and start understanding how the world works, and the way people have lived, and the way animals live, and the way the ecosystem works. That's my opinion. So that's kind of why I continue to post, is that it's number one, getting ahead of it, getting in front of it, not necessarily to outshine other people. There's amazing falconers that are doing amazing things, and I try my best to promote them on my platform, to bring them up, to say this guy's doing great with his dog or his bird. I'm proud of them, and promote the good falconry, like Paul was saying. I am inadvertently trying to push people to the top to be viewed that I think should be viewed, and then those that aren't, I just it's just like, not that you don't like what they're doing and you're like hateful or a hater or whatever. It's just kind of like you say something to them, they don't want to hear it. I don't really say much to people other than people that I know personally about stuff. Like I had an incident where I said something to somebody just the other day. I said, you shouldn't have posted that. And he's like, yeah, you're right. And and then it came down. You know what I mean? It was just like, sometimes we get a little caught up with trying to share too much. And then it can bite you in the butt and just make a bad look for you. So that's my stance. Getting ahead of it. Social media falconry is out of the bottle. There's falconers out there that love attention. I would say that I love attention, but it's not really about me. I know it's not about me. It's just about my birds. I'd be flying birds regardless, whether there's social media or not. Doesn't really matter. I just want to put forth the best image of falconry to the general public, and then in every interaction, as much as I can, share what falconry is and the beauty of it. And if somebody has a crazy comment, I go back with, well, this is what happens in the wild every day. That's what they do. So I'm sorry that offends you. And there's politely, some people, there's no talking to them, but that's kind of my motivation, is to get out in front of it, make a good representation of falconry. So.
Do you have a quick rebuttal there?
No, not a rebuttal, but I mean, I get the sense of it that you're sharing what you think is cool, right? I mean, you're seeing, when I see your videos, like I know you personally, so it's like, hey, this is really cool what my bird just did. I want to share. Like, that's like, hey, this is really cool. I put it out there, and for me, I do the same thing, but I put it out there for the people that I know that I allow my account, and really for myself. And like, I love sharing it with you, and I'll also have like group Slack where I'm sharing that. Right. I just don't have that motivation to share with the general public, but it's that same, hey, this is really cool. Bird had a great slip, great flight. Look at this.
Yeah. And just to clarify for people listening, this is Paul speaking to Casey about, just the thoughts and everything. But, well, I mean, so I guess we can just keep going down the row and Pac, I know you have probably an interesting take on this too. I mean, you work in law enforcement. You really have to be careful about what you are allowing for yourself to be seen from a public point of view and things like that for your job and your profession and things like that too. But, I mean, what are your overall thoughts on a lot of this stuff?
Well, as you said, I definitely, for the past, I would say 15 years, I've done a lot to make sure I don't have any profile online. I don't have any social media because I don't want to deal with the headaches that comes along with it. As far as falconry in social media, I kind of see from both sides of the view. In a sense, I agree with Phil on a lot of issue, on the sense that it really shouldn't be out to the public, because the way I kind of view it is a lot of what you do is documentation, and you're providing ammunition for the animal rights people. Because like it or not, we do have a lot of anti-falconries, either birdwatcher or animal rights people, who will use that against you in any way, shape, or form. I've also seen a lot of pigeon fancier who use a lot of trapping videos that we put out there on YouTube, and they'll use that to catch hawks and just, kill them, and that's the end of the day. That information, when I started in 1992, it was much harder to get on how to make a BC, how to do a bow net, how to make all of these traps. So now it's commonly available to everybody. To me, so yes, there's a good and there's a bad. From the good side for me is that I use my wife's social media, so I don't have anything on myself. So I stalk Casey's and all that stuff. So I do get to see, from Casey's point of view, is that none of my wife's friends are falconers. They borderline animal lover, animal rights people. And the way how Casey have done it, they actually have, they actually follow them. I couldn't believe it. They enjoy the music, they enjoy the interaction. So I think from the falconer side of view, in a sense, as Casey have said, the genie's out of the box. And at the end of the day, we can't hide and be clandestine in what we do. Because unfortunately, the way how falconry and the way our hunting community is, in order for us to continue this art, the sports that we're so passionate about, I think we need numbers. The only way we're going to get numbers is actually to encourage someone else. That's the same way I got involved with all this stuff. I watch a show on Nature on PBS. Well, kids are not watching TV anymore. They're going to click on, hopefully he's going to inspire someone to become a falconer. I actually did have someone who was supposed to shovel a bird, and they called me up. They're like, yeah, there's this guy who's a falconer. And he was like, is that a white bird? Yeah, I actually knew him. So that Casey's action there prevented a bird from being beaten with a shovel in a chicken coop because of his video. So I was like, there's a benefit to that. But from my side, from my personal side, every time you document something like that, once again, it goes back to that side. It can be used against you. So personally, I don't want to deal with that cancel mentality. I don't want to deal with the repercussion of me doing something. I don't want to deal with any of that, dilemma. Therefore, I don't have anything. I have zero footprint on social media. Although I do watch Casey's video, I watch other videos. I've seen the negative impact that comes off on, someone doing something that, I mean, you got to look at most of these videos. They're 30 seconds, 40 seconds to a minute clip. And like in any other video where you see on the video on TV and all this stuff, it's can be taken out of context. You're not getting the whole story. You're just getting a small clip where people can sit there. Oh, we're doing baggies. We're doing something wrong. Stuff like that. That can be taken out of context. That will be my negative on social media. But I think it's a great way for us to see how other people do stuff. I've learned a lot from social media. I mean, like personally, I had watched a guy. Flying, doing eagle falconry in other countries, and it was simple for me just to Facebook message the guy, hey, I'm actually going to Thailand next month. Can you hook up? I love to see how you do stuff. It was a great connection. So that is something I there's a benefit to it, but it has to be balanced out like everything else.
Mm-hmm. Well, and on the flip side, is it really ever going to be 100% possible to maintain an absolute pure balance, though? I mean, there's always going to be a good and a bad with everything, and we're always going to end up having to take the good with the bad. I mean, basically, the way I look at it is there's no way we're going to be able to stop anything that we personally don't like that someone else may not necessarily even have a problem with. But, I mean, the only thing we can do is just try and encourage each other to basically try and point things out to each other that, someone may not necessarily see what may be wrong potentially with something, but it's kind of our responsibility within our own community to kind of point things out to people in, a nice and tactful way when possible or whatever, but just be like, yeah, you may want to rethink, the way you're presenting that or whatever. But I mean, is there any other option better than that in your mind other than just completely wiping it and just doing away with it? Or is that the best way you think that we're going to be able to continue to deal with this kind of stuff?
No, I think unfortunately as I want to repeat what Casey says, the genie's definitely out of the box. There's nothing, we can't turn back to time. And I think if you post something out there, you have to prepare for the potential repercussion of it. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say. I don't blindly post anything on there just because I don't want to deal with that headache. And if you put it out there, once you put it out to public, don't expect the extra scrutiny, either from law enforcement of where you are. There's plenty of video where I've seen people doing stuff, and it's like that could be questionable on whether you are trespassing, you're doing stuff. Why would you want to document that case? Mm-hmm. I mean, from my personal experience, I've definitely been able to solve so many crimes just because of Facebook, and location of where you are. Mm-hmm. Like I said, it can be used against you.
Sure.
It can be it can be extremely helpful, but understand that, I mean, especially with the younger crowd today, I definitely I can live without my phone. I can function without social media. With the younger Falconers today, everything's on social media, and I think there's a lack of filter on what's going out there. You have to be somewhat policing yourself.
Well, and like you said too, I mean, everything's kind of a snapshot, because for every nice, really cool catch or something, or a video of something that's really neat, where you see about 10 to 15 seconds approximately of it, we aren't always. There's always the other 5 minutes or so of the video too that I mean, you don't really know what happens before, after, during, and so I mean, I think it's a good point. You just need to, if nothing else, just think twice, give it a second thought before you don't, just outright put something up and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people, for whatever reason, might not actually think about the law enforcement side of it too, so anyway. All right, man. Well, that brings us to Eric, the last guy, for better or for worse, in line with all this. What are some of your thoughts on this, bub?
Personally, I try not to post anything, mm-hmm. but eventually you have to. It's a personal decision. It's just not for me. On the other hand, I have seen some really positive sides. I work in extremely high profile. I deal with a lot of general public, and working in abatement, I have people that come up to me, happens at least 8-10 times a year. Do you know NJ Falconry? You mean Casey? Oh my God, you know him? And well, yeah, I know.
Unfortunately,
why? And it's like, oh, I watch all of his videos. He's and it's like, what do you do? Well, I'm a cop. From where? Pennsylvania, Ohio, Maine. I've had all kinds of stuff, or somebody's a housewife, but it's been kind of thrown out there because of social media. On the other hand, I see a lot of the negative of social media. There's some of the videos I watch, thank God, swipe up and it's gone, and, but, there's good and there's bad in everything. And there's always going to be that vocal 1% that is going to hate you no matter what you do. So, in a lot of ways, it's a good idea just to, well, forget them. Don't even talk to them. Don't even entertain them. I mean, every now and then I see a post where it's like, oh my God, and it's, and you see everybody, getting on. So in some way it kind of, I guess, sort of polices itself, but in another way, who cares?
Well, yeah, and we within our own community can be some of our own most brutal critics of it all too. And there's room for that in some ways, but at the same time, there's also a lot of things that could be handled, more tactfully. I mean, my personal thoughts on it, for what anybody really cares, is what I hate seeing. And, I've said this to, people to their face, and personal conversations, friends. And, if anybody does end up having a situation where there is a beef or any kind of issue that is, or at least needs to be addressed or whatever, yeah, social media usually isn't the best platform for that. If there's issues that need to be worked out, then yeah, I mean, the greater things and the greater topics of things like that need to be worked out and stuff are usually best worked out interpersonally, away from the eyes of everyone else. And that, I mean, it really just needs to be between, the main two parties, or however many parties that are, I mean, really the thing that was made very apparent to me when I first started getting out with the guys that have molded my falconry and taught me what I know, is that one of the guys who was initially practicing falconry in our state before all the regs, one of the older generation falconers and stuff, he said something that resonated very, very deeply with me, in that it doesn't matter if you're divided on a topic. It doesn't matter if you have some disagreement within the falconry community. When it comes to certain things, since we are such a small number, we have to be pretty much a completely united front whenever we are talking to other entities or dealing with other entities that have an issue with what we do as a whole. And you can't do that whenever you have people that are constantly, having issues with each other within the community. Figure it out, come to a resolution, deal with it, get over it, get on with it, move on with your life, and the rest, I mean, because what everybody tends to forget sometimes is that this is meant to just be fun. And what I've told people, including some of our friends here within this very room, is we all have to remind each other whenever we're out with these birds and stuff. It's like, we're not curing cancer, when we're out in the field. We're not curing serious diseases or illnesses. We're having fun or fixing world problems or anything. We're having fun with birds, and sometimes we all tend to take ourselves a little too seriously, and the social media realm, I've seen, just from what I've seen, and I've been, kind of fallen victim to some of this stuff too. But anytime I've ever had an issue with anybody, someone would message me personally or whatever, resolve it, move on, do what you can to make it right. And everything's been great, from then on out. I mean, so all that being said, that's my personal feelings on it. I personally have taken a big step back with my posting and stuff, just because, number one, I don't have the time. I'm editing podcasts. I'm doing all these different things. It's not as important for me anymore for other people that I don't know personally to be aware of what I'm doing. So that's just me. My thing is just resolve differences immediately and with each other, without sharing it with the rest of the world. Other than that, yeah, just think twice and be smart about it, whatever you're going to post. But before we move on to the next topic, though, does anybody else have any other thoughts or anything that popped into their head over this particular topic?
I mean, I would just say, on that train of thought that you just had there, is that the reason why there's these conflicts and these differences is that the falconry community as a whole is trying to maintain a certain standard, right?
Sure.
So that when somebody's presents a picture of what they call falconry that's outside of an acceptable standard, they're going to get attacked. Unfortunately, it's usually done with malice when it's done online and through behind the keyboards or behind your iPhone. But in reality, it's you're trying to maintain, the group as a whole ideally is trying to maintain a quality of falconry. Pick a presentation of falconry that's quality, right? So if somebody's just throwing out, videos of an owl coming to the fist and just calling that their falconry, they're going to get a reputation from the falconry community. If they're just showing baggies, released quarry as their game and game counts, that's gonna, they're gonna get criticism, and that's all about a certain community that we have is trying to maintain a certain standard. Unfortunately, it's not done ideally one-on-one or sometimes with the right touch. But anyway, it's a natural societal thing. And I think especially falconry in the United States, I think is as a whole tries to maintain a pretty good standard and quality. And when people jeopardize that by posting poor falconry or poor techniques or something in bad taste, they unfortunately get the wrath of the majority of falconers out there, which is not necessarily the nicest thing. So my apprentices, I tell them, just try to stay off of that unless, and don't go using social media to try to get all the advice you can or post everything out there unless you kind of have a good understanding of what's acceptable or not yet.
Sure, yeah, because you don't know, unless you've actually seen other people's falconry in person, it's very easy to get a misrepresentation of because the definition of what someone's standard for high practices in a lot of this is different from one person to the other. And, what your sponsor might view as acceptable or what he wants. Your sponsor is who's molding you and helping shape you and signing off on you and teaching you. And, they're overall whoever's teaching you needs to be kind of the first measure of that.
Right. But if you're learning out there in the public forum, it's dangerous.
Exactly. Well, and because you don't know what everybody's,
because you're going to have mistakes, right? And you don't understand what necessarily is acceptable in that community yet if you haven't participated or sit back and watch and learn to a certain extent. But yeah, anyway, just sharing that aspect of it.
Well, and if anybody else doesn't have any closing thoughts then on this topic, good points, good thoughts. So far, this doesn't seem like it's turned into a cluster, so we're just going to keep going with it. And so the next topic, which we just had the perfect segue into it, is sponsorship. And really, that is something that I have had many, I wouldn't even say debate, but many, I guess, a really, detailed and intricate, in-depth conversation with multiple people about this topic recently, because I've gotten a chance to now meet so many different people through doing this, and so many people have so many different opinions on what the standards of a sponsor should be, what the requirements should be, there's so many people out there that other people are seeing that in their point of view are not getting all they should be getting as far as setting that standard, that bar that has been referred to so far in this discussion about what really, who really should be able to be sponsors and things like that, and who's most qualified, and passing on these standards to the next generations of falconers.
Not everybody should be parents, and there's parents out there, so it's unfortunately we have a little bit more control with falconry.
Yeah, and that's a good analogy. And you can go ahead and start us off again there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I was getting ready to turn it over to you anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. Taking on an apprentice is a big deal for me personally. It does take time. I view the sponsor apprentice relationship it's almost like, you become a part of the family. You're going to be somebody I'm going to know for the rest of my life. I'm going to have some level of interaction. We'll probably become friends. And it's going to change your life. It's going to change my life. So I don't take on just a random apprentice very easily. I other people do, and I think there's a great reward aspect of it as far as it enriches your life and enriches the other person's the apprentice's life, hopefully for the better. It's an important decision of who's going to be your sponsor or how you're going to do falconry. If you're an apprentice, you're going to seek. I try to recommend somebody I think is going to. If I can't sponsor that person, I'm going to try to recommend another falconer that I know is going to promote quality falconry, and give them the best chance for success. Those are just my initial thoughts. I want to give everybody else an opportunity to talk. So.
All right, Casey, you're up on this. I know you've got some interesting thoughts on this and stuff too. So.
Yeah, I got a lot of opinions. No. In all seriousness, I mean, it's just like pretty much common sense. I think most of the community is aware in every state of the guy that'll sponsor anybody. Like most states have some of them where there's, where they just, they sponsor a lot of people. They may not put out the best product at the end, which is not necessarily always their fault. I was lucky enough to have incredible sponsors. Phil Aaliyah was my sponsor, but Paul, who's sitting next to me, lives next door. I consider him my sponsor, just like Phil, and they're brothers. They're right next door, and we hawk together. I learned from the best. They learned from Teddy. Teddy doesn't take any crap from anybody, and it's going to be done the right way. So I was taught to do it the right way, through threat of physical violence as well as verbal abuse. So, which I think was for my benefit, and I messed up a couple of times pretty seriously, and I had to hear about it. Maybe get double-legged here and there by Phil, but you gotta, there has to be a standard that has to be set, and it has to be met by the apprentice. And if it's not met by the apprentice, and then the sponsor drops said apprentice, there should be no way that apprentice can jump from one to the next, from one sponsor to the other sponsor to continue with the process, which is something that I have heard of and seen in a few different occasions. It may not be a common thing that happens, but I have seen it. And I do understand where there's differences of opinion. I do know, I won't say any names, but I know a good falconer that I really like and we hawk a lot. He didn't have the best relationship with his sponsor. His sponsor was asking a few things of him that was a little bit over the top, like a little bit unreasonable. And if I say what they are, then everybody will know who it is. So I'm not going to say anything, but it's, I could totally understand why that relationship didn't work. It was a little bit bizarre. And it was basically one of those things where you're going to do what I tell you to enhance my to enhance my standing in the community, and it was completely unreasonable. And this person's like, "Well, I'm not doing that." And then the sponsor was like, "Well, then I'm not passing off on your falconry, And then it was like they jumped from him to another sponsor. It turned out to be an awesome falconer, good friend of mine. We hawk all the time, runs good dogs, flies good birds. So in that situation, I could understand, like, okay. And that's just an example. I'm sure it's throughout the whole country. There's probably examples of this all day and night. But there are those instances where somebody, that is just clearly not listening, doing whatever they want, and it's becoming a disaster, and it's starting to affect your reputation. And then when they are dropped, they just go and, ask somebody else, and the other person's like, yeah, whatever, I'll sponsor you. And then it's like, what are we doing here? Now we're just allowing stuff. But like, I don't know what the solution is. I'm not sitting here saying I know the answer. I'm just viewing different things that I have, issues with. And to Paul's point, and I'll wrap this up. I've been a falconer for, going on 18 years now. I have never met anybody actually, except for Pecorn's apprentice, Cowboy Boots. I like him. He's great. He was the only kid that I was like, I would, just an example. Yeah. But I have people that ask me all the time, multiple times a month to be, to say, oh, will you sponsor me? I'm like, I've never met anybody that's like this person. Like, I want to sponsor this person. Like, I just feel like not that I compare myself to them, but I just see the level of, like, I couldn't sleep at night. I was obsessed. I was like, anything I could do to try to get out with them, clean their mew. And some of these guys now, it's like, meet me at the field. And it's like, hey, you coming? Okay, we're going to get started. Are you going to come? And it's like, and then they text them the next day, hey, can we go? It's like, no, like, if you want to go, you're going to make it happen. Like, one way or another, you're going to get there. You're going to make it happen. And I, just for me, I wanted to do everything I could to be sponsored. And it took me like a year of like, cleaning mews and, just basically sucking up to to get sponsored, and it was, it's for my benefit. And I feel like nowadays it's just, there was an incident that was recent, and it was literally a phone call from somebody from Instagram, and then they signed the papers for them. And I said something to the individual. I said, that was extremely foolish. You don't know this person. They could ruin your reputation, and you need to vet them a little bit more. Have you gone hawking with them? Well, no. Have you met them in person? Well, no. When we had a conversation on the phone, it was really nice. They seem cool. Send over the paperwork. I'll sign it. It's bizarre. You know what I mean? It's a little bit bizarre. So I don't know what the answer is. Like you were alluding to, my standards may be unreasonable for somebody else. So I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know what the answer is, but that's kind of like my overall view on the whole subject.
Well, yeah, and ultimately, there's got to be somebody that sets whatever standard, and unfortunately, we're all human beings, and every human being is going to have a different view of what a standard should be for a lot of these different things. And yeah, I mean, it's tough. I agree, and that's a big reason why I don't plan on sponsoring anybody anytime soon or anything like that either, is because I can't meet right now, like what I would ask of somebody. I can't dedicate that time on my end either. I mean, so I would never ask anybody to do anything that I didn't do to earn, and I like to use the terminology earn my sponsorship, And so anyway, yeah, I mean, I don't know what the right answer is, but well, maybe Pac has the right answer for us. I don't know, whatever.
Well, as we mentioned before, I have a unique sponsorship situation. When I started, I was 14 at the time. I didn't have a car. And back then there was no internet. So I just had one name. It was Frank Weber. It was a long time ago. He passed already. Great guy. But he couldn't sponsor me. So I eventually went to another person who ended up subsequently sponsoring me. And within, I would say, 6-7 months, he lost his falconry license, and I didn't have any apprentice. This was before learning or knowing anything about Jersey Falconry Club or knowing any other falconer. So I did all of my falconry based on just reading books and trial and error. Lots of mistakes were made. Made me a better person, So for me, sponsorship is a very valuable process of falconry. I think falconry is a very selective sport. So just the process alone, you vet out, just something as simple as taking the test, getting the mule and all of that stuff has already weeded out most of the wannabe, someone who's not serious. But you'll still get someone who's going to be in there just because they want to have an owl sitting on their hand and looking pretty. Okay, so you'll still get that. So my experience has been, and I'm kind of from a holistic point of view, is that by you being a sponsor to someone else, it makes you a better falconer because you've been doing this for quite some time, and breaking it back down to the basic is how you really can, understand your craft even better. One of the lessons I learned was, when I was in college, we were learning some crazy stuff about cell respiratory, and I couldn't understand that for crap. I mean, I passed the class, and you're a respiratory therapist, you can understand this, and then the Krebs cycle. I couldn't understand that until I had to teach it as a TA, as a teacher, and then I realized I understand it even better because now I have to break it down to a point where even a high school student or the dumbest person in the world can understand it. And that, I think, made me a better person. And me breaking down falconry and how the basic stuff to everybody, I think that made me a better person. And it gave me a little bit more of an empathy. I understand, us doing this all the time. How can someone not understand that? And you tend to judge that guy's a moron. But in reality, they don't have the experience. They don't know what's good. Like I said before, I tried hawking a red tail at a flock of pigeons. That was how I started. I would walk up, to a city park in Jersey City with a red tail on my fist and, throw out some corn or something, and all of a sudden sneak around and then toss out the pigeon, toss out the red tail, and the pigeon flies up the tree, and I'm like, oh, what happened here? Thinking, yeah. But that was the only thing I had. The only book I had was a NAFA book. I mean, not the North American Falconer book. That was all I had. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know anything better. And then finally, as I'm walking through the woods one day, the damn thing caught a rabbit on his own. I was like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. And then I was catching rats in the dump in Lincoln Park in Jersey City. It was full of rats. So I was catching rats every day because I lost like 2 other red tail before then because the birds see no value in hanging out with me. It's like, oh, this guy's useless. So I went out self-hunt.
Yeah.
So once I started catching these giant rats in Jersey City, by the way, and it, it bit like squirrels, it bit me, it did everything. So after that point, this red tail became the best bird I ever had because it's like, oh, wherever this guy is, I want to be right there rather than I want to be 100 yards away from this guy. So that's my opinion on falconry in the sense that, I think sponsorship is so important. And for me, like the 2 things I've always told my apprentices, like, okay, you're coming with me in the field. You're going to hawk with me for at least a month or so, just to make sure you're outdoorsy. Most people don't realize that they have never been out in the woods before. And the requirement that I have, I think it's pretty simple. You better catch a dozen head of games before I sign off every year. If you're not, you're not going to move forward. That is one of my things that I tell everybody is like, you shouldn't really be buying food during the winter season with a passage red tail. I'll give you a month to go free fly your bird, but you should be catching game. If you're not, it could be because you're not going out enough or you're doing something wrong here. And that, to me, that requirement kind of weed out a lot of issues and identified a lot of issues. I mean, I've had, I'm not going to name anybody. I've had apprentices that thought it was a great idea to have a red tail sitting on your shoulder. Doesn't go well for me. And last thing I want to do is and most people don't understand that a red tail can really hurt you.
Yeah.
And that's something I don't want that happen. And, going back to that concept, it's our job. We're the mentor. We got to mentor them the right way, show them the right way, because you let someone else who's not good for the sport, it can damage the entire sport.
Sure.
So I think this is our way of policing the system.
Well, and the only thoughts that I have to add to that is like, I think there's a lot of instances in the world where people synonymize ignorance and stupidity. And in reality, they're 2 very different things. You were ignorant because you didn't know that you couldn't, pigeons and red tails really aren't a great mix. I mean, sure, they can adapt in some places, whatever. A red tail might catch a pigeon every so often or whatever. But if you're ignorant, that really just means that you don't know something, like you haven't been taught yet. Like you said, I mean, someone that is listening to this that hasn't listened to any other episodes before or had any guidance whatsoever before, you probably heard us snickering, like in the background and stuff whenever you were telling that. And they're probably thinking, well, why are they snickering? Well, it's because they don't know any better either. Like someone that doesn't know about that situation is ignorant to the fact that that's not a very good combo. You're not really setting yourself up for the best success for that. Stupidity, on the other hand, though, is whenever you should know, you have been taught and you have been shown the distinction or whatever, and yet you still choose to do the wrong things anyway. That's stupid, and I think there's a lot of people that synonymize the 2, but are also they're equally hard on the ignorant whenever they maybe technically shouldn't be, because if you're ignorant, it just means that nobody's taught you yet. I mean, you lack knowledge. That's basically what ignorance is. And so our job, I think, is falconers and potential sponsors or whatever too, is just to, keep people from crossing the line from ignorant to stupid, and I don't know, that's my take on that anyway. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it is very important, and yeah, I would have loved to have been there to watch that. By the way, I'm just saying. But anyway, I mean, what are your thoughts, Eric?
I've had more than 2 apprentices and quite a few. I really never had too many problems with them, and I spent quite a lot of time with them. Made sure that they were doing good. And surprisingly, my worst enemy has become the internet. I get apprentices that argue with me. Well, no, we can't do it like that because I read so-and-so does it like this. And, somebody told me this. Well, who is it that told you this? Oh, some guy from another country. They don't even fly red tails over there, you know.
Yeah.
And it's amazing the weight, especially of the younger generation, that, well, I read it on the internet, it must be true. And even when you sit there and explain to them, well, no, you don't do it because of this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason. It's like, well, I'm still going to do it. Okay, well, you go ahead and have fun, you know, and then they'll come back to you. Well, why didn't it work? Because you're an idiot.
Well, and that brings me to back to what I was just talking about. You know, there's ignorance and then there's stupidity. That's stupid. You know. So yeah, continue on with your thought, though. You know,
but it's, you know, the apprenticeship program is actually, I think it's kind of necessary in the sport. Maybe not for everybody, but for the majority of people, it is necessary. It's kind of hard to learn. It's something that, you know, without guidance and seeing it, it's you're going to stumble hard. And I was one of those people. I stumbled hard, real hard, you know. But it makes it a little bit easier, a little bit more fun. But you know, you also have the new entitlement, you know, coming around. If you you know, at least when I became a falconer, there was no such thing as heard of, you know, past the sponsor or past the apprentice. You know, like, the apprentice doesn't like his sponsor. Well, I'll take him. You know, well, he doesn't like this guy either. Who else is next? You know, and I've seen it. It's happened to me. You know, I've had one apprentice. Well, he knew I wasn't going to sign off on him anyway, but couldn't believe it before I found out that I was no longer his. I didn't even know he wasn't my apprentice anymore. It was just like, what do you mean he's not my apprentice? I never signed anything. I never, you know, oh yeah, no, he's this guy's apprentice. And it's kind of it's nobody wants to make waves, you know, and I think it would be a lot of things in this world, but this is the rules. This is the way it works. You know, you better go by it or you're not getting what you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You have another thought, Paul?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, the interesting thing about choosing to do, have an apprentice is that, you know, if you don't sponsor that person, if you know, and that apprentice may find that another person to sponsor them that is not ideal, right? So I have an apprentice right now, Dana, and you know, I didn't want her. She lives in my area, right? So why would I want her to go be sponsored by somebody else and learn falconry? Maybe not to the standard that maybe I'd want her to be a good falconer. If she's going to be in my area, I want her to be a good falconer, responsible falconer, and practicing it as best as I can. And there really wasn't many other options around for her, but I didn't want her to go to find another random sponsor. So that influenced my decision. The fact that she's going to be potentially practicing falconry close to where I live, very close to where I live, is a good reason to take on an apprentice as opposed to letting them flounder and find anybody else.
Well, I mean, did this person, though, check off all your other boxes on what you consider to be a standard, though? Or did you make exceptions because of that, though?
No, I mean, you know, again, person, you know, likes the outdoors, is out there already. She wasn't a hunter per se, but, you know, she wasn't willing, you know, she was willing to come out to the field with us. She went hawking for the season before she got her license. I mean, all these things that showed, you know, true interest and a desire. So I knew that she was gonna be a falconer at some point, even if I didn't sponsor her. I'm glad that I did. I mean, she's done real well with the first season. She's in her second season, but you know, that's important. You know, you want to maintain a quality, you know, a certain quality of falconry. It's up to you or the people around you to help maintain that quality. If you just if nobody's willing to sponsor other apprentices, you can't complain when they're when they're posting really stupid things online, or they're doing, very, very poor falconry, right? So,
well, and so I guess as kind of another sub question to this topic then is, do you find, and I don't know, maybe some of you guys are going to have different views on this too, but I've had a conversation recently with another friend in Falconer that, hasn't been very happy with the way, like the regs have been and stuff for a long time. They were put into place, quite a while ago, and there's varying perception as to why those regs were put into place in the beginning anyway. And there's some people within the community I've heard echo thoughts of, well, they were really honestly put into place for exclusionary purposes, more so than to uphold a certain standard per se. Some people say, well, the regs are in place to try and weed out people and to uphold a standard, whatever. What are your thoughts on that? And if you think that there should be any changes or updates to the way we conduct our sponsor and apprenticeship system here, what would they be in your mind then?
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic. I'm a pretty independently minded person. I think that, a limited amount of regulation, just enough to maintain a certain quality, is what's important, and let people live their life independently. But in reality, I don't think there was a much better way to get it legalized and get it accepted by the general public and by the powers that be at the time without this system. And it does serve a purpose in the fact that it does help maintain a quality. It's not a perfect system at all. And one could argue, what gives the government a right to restrict somebody's ability to pursue happiness through falconry with these unnecessary regulations. So, but in reality, I don't think it would have been approved, and I don't think it'd be accepted without those guardrails. Unfortunately, we live in not an idealistic world where we can wish for a theoretical, unregulated pursuit of happiness throughout the country that doesn't infringe on anybody's rights. So it's a necessary evil in my eyes right now to have a set of regulations. I'm not one to overregulate anything. So as much liberties as you can provide and still maintain the freedoms that we have in falconry in this country that a lot of other countries don't have. And that's what I'm afraid of, right? We could still trap our birds to some extent, to most of the areas in this country. Connecticut, the exception, and a couple other areas, and some of the limitations on the species, which I don't think are necessary either. But by and large, you can still practice true falconry in the United States. That's not available in most of the Western world right now. So if the apprentice sponsor system that we have now has helped maintain that, then it's a necessary evil and probably actually does more good than harm. That's my opinion.
Cool. Well, what do you think, Casey?
I do have a couple opinions on that, and you see other countries that don't have any regulations where birds of prey are basically considered almost like part of the pet trade, where anybody can just go to a breeder and just say, here's X amount of dollars or pounds, and just go home with a Harris hawk. Do you have a place to put it? Do you know how
or a golden eagle?
Or a golden eagle, yeah. Exactly, literally.
Yeah.
So I on a personal note, I don't like the government, so so except for Pac. I like Pac. He's kind of part of that. But the fact that this, all these people, I'm on social media, I get messages daily, multiple times, tons of messages. How do I do this? How do I get involved in this? If all those people saw, I got to get me a falcon, I get that one a million times a week. And it's they could, if we didn't have the system that we have. They could just go on Google and look up white falcon breeders online, and then just pay the money, get a falcon, and then just put it in their closet. You know what I mean? And then take it out at dinner parties, and just the thing dies, or they feed it chicken livers. You know what I mean? in America, we have a standard, and I know what you're saying and what your your friend, how it was maybe put in place for a different reason. But I do think it has served, at least to an extent, to kind of keep a standard. Because, and I'm not even going to argue country to country or stuff like that, but I would say the caliber of falconry in states that are more regulated, the caliber is going to be, in my opinion, logically, it's going to be higher. It has to be higher, at least for the general majority. Because in a country, you may have 50,000 falconers, right? But 20,000 of them actually practice true falconry. They eat, sleep, and breathe it. Everybody else just has a hawk in their yard. In America, like, not everybody practices to the level that, like, maybe I would think or other people would think, but they have to jump through so many hoops to get that license, where it's like by default they're going to take it more seriously. People don't respect things when they're free. People respect things when they have to work for them. So the fact that in America we kind of have to work to become a falconer, I feel like by default you're going to kind of have a little bit more respect for it and maybe try to uphold it a little bit more and take it slightly more seriously. So.
All right. Well, and in your opinion, then also, I mean, would there be? I mean, if you could make any changes, what would they be? Because we had this talk earlier, and I mean, like, what do you think could be put into place or should be put into place, in your humble opinion, to increase that standard even further?
I think I'm super hesitant to say anything about a joint venture with the Fish and Wildlife Agency, because it could become for instance, if we have a committee and each state has a committee of falconers that are respected and you vote on who's on that board, they decide who gets to sponsor somebody. Your falconer is not up to par. You are not eligible to sponsor somebody. These are the prerequisites to become a sponsor. But then me and you kind of talked a little earlier in the car that it could become like somebody doesn't like so-and-so, so now they're not qualified, even though they are. Mm-hmm. And then they have to prove that they are to the government, and then they can't sponsor anybody. You know what I mean? Like, it could become like a very slippery slope where it becomes like just like a backstabbing, personal vendetta kind of situation. But I would say outside of the government, I would say that maybe states in their club, and I mean, me and Eric have talked about this a couple times, that maybe there's a board. Like, I'm a master plumber, right? I have a master plumber's license. There's a board that I answer to. And if I overcharge somebody, if I don't practice my plumbing to the highest level, somebody gets sick, something happens, I have to go stand before them, and they can revoke my license. They can put a lien against my property. I answer to them. They're like their own entity. They can literally write me tickets, cite me, garner my wages. I take it really seriously because I had to work really hard to get it. So having a board of, falconers in a state where they maybe have, they vote on who can possibly be sponsors, or vote on who can be apprentices. And if X amount of people in that community that are respected say, yeah, we like this person, they're this, they're that, they meet all the prerequisites, let's find them a sponsor, they live here, I think that person would be great, let's team them up together, go from there. There's a differences of opinions. Let's have a meeting about it, whether it's on Skype, whatever the case may be. Let's talk about it. Let's see what the issues are. Hey, I want you to do all this crazy stuff and do these unnecessary things. And then the board's like, well, that's not really necessary. I can see your apprentice's point where I don't think that, and you can hash it out and keep it internal. So I don't know, you know what I mean? I don't know the answer to the question. I really don't. But I think that some sort of a board or committee, that's transparent to kind of oversee some of this stuff might be a possibility. I don't know. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Well, and we were going to have the government perspective chime in here, pack. So,
I guess I'm the agent provocateur for Casey, since, just to track him with his anti-government rhetoric there. But for me, I will agree with your previous statement saying that it's designed to be exclusionary. I do agree. It is designed to exclude the undesirable, people who don't belong in this hobby. And I'm going to make the best analogy to this is that look at the reptile hobby. Okay. Anyone, I'm not going to name the show, but you have a 15-year-old kid who goes out and buy a reticulated python for $90. Within 2 years, that snake will be 10 feet. Can cause massive amount of damage, because I was one of those kids who bought one of those snakes. Okay? And it eventually goes into, I want, in the 90s, it was the coolest thing to walk around with a big snake around your head and all that stuff. And, I had a huge monitor. I did all of that stuff. But granted, I had my own place. But a lot of people don't have that place. What do? They release them to the environment. They kill them. I can tell you, how many reptiles I've found that were dead in the cruelest way in freezer and all that stuff. And I don't want to see something like that in falconry, because I think if we have, and as someone who came from other countries and see how falconry is done in other country, it's private property over there, which I agree with. I don't think the government should own the bird that we paid for. I totally understand that concept. But at the same concept, the moment it becomes a private property, the government loses the right to kind of regulate us. And now you can have, like with any country, you can just walk, let me get a golden eagle in my apartment. And if it hurts somebody, if it causes injury, it becomes an issue not just from the view of falconry or society as overall. It can cause, like, look at the Burmese python in Florida. Tegu and all these little shutdown that's going on now, all these animals are now illegal. And it's because of that. And I can potentially see something like that being done where someone can just, I'll give you an example. Thailand. Yeah, you want an eagle? Go ahead. Well, they'll clip the feathers and you feed some bacon and you'll be perfectly fine. No one cares. Okay, that's how it was done when I came to this country. That was my experience with the first bird. Treated like a parrot. No one cares. It's something. As much as it's weird in the sense that I support the government to an extent, not completely. I see what happened when there's no regulation. Like, there's a lot of people who say, oh, we want complete freedom of government. And you can see what happened when there's no, I don't want a complete authoritarian organization going in, but at the same shot, we can't have, like being backwood of Somalia somewhere where there's no regulation at all and everyone can do whatever they want. It becomes Mad Max. So there's a fine line going back to everything.
Very true. Very true. Did you have something to add, Paul?
Well, yeah, and then you get to a point where the general public won't accept the misbehaving few, and then you'll end up with it being outlawed, right? You won't be able to trap your own red tail anymore because they've seen so many people do things that were inappropriate with them. So that's the catch-22. You need the regulations in order for it to be accepted by the general public. In an ideal world, everybody would just let everybody live their own life, but we don't live in a society that does that. And they push what they feel is acceptable on everybody else through laws. And we would get outlawed, essentially, if it was an unregulated sport, unfortunately. People would see things that they wouldn't like to the point where it gets outlawed.
Sure. Well, and in some countries' case, I mean, even like with my new friends in, South Africa and parts of, the different countries there, then a lot of places don't have the resources to continually manage things too. And if they see that something is starting to get to the point where it's just not worth the time to be managed and stuff, and someone has the power, then they're just going to say, all right, illegal, no more. Yeah, don't have the time to mess with you. It's now done, whatever. And yeah, it's a very real thing. it could happen. And so it's very, very valid points as well. But yeah, so what are your thoughts on it, Eric?
There's no magical pill, and nobody's ever going to be happy.
Yeah.
I could see in a lot of ways where there's a lot of areas that, wow, I'd really love to see some more regulation. And if it ever happened and half the room found out I supported it, they'd probably jump me in the bathroom. But on the other hand, it's less regulation brings other problems. So we have a system that is working. It's not too overbearing. And it does seem to help with weeding a lot of people that really don't belong. And just by them not wanting to go through the steps to become a falconer, which really isn't that terribly hard. I mean, it's cumbersome, but it's, if you really want it, you can do it. Why change it?
Yeah. And so in your mind, then there's not really anything you'd really add or subtract at this point, or make changes to?
I could think of a million things I would like to add, and can think of a bunch of things I would like to subtract, but none of them are right. So, I would love to, personally, it's just a personal little thing. You have a bunch of falconers running around that have flown one red-tailed hawk, and I'm a master falconer. No. Yeah. Oh, yeah, what have you flown, a red-tail? Yeah, 20 years. Well, you're probably a master of that red-tail. But you ever flown a falcon, a coops, a goss?
Sure.
But they, on the other hand, they have the opportunity to do that if they decided to. So why not?
Yeah. Well, and, I know, Pac, me and you were talking at dinner a little bit, and, about how a lot of certain aspects of how other countries do things wouldn't probably fly very well with the way we do things here. But at the same time, it almost seems like it would be a really nice to be able to hybridize and cherry pick, all these little things that you see that kind of works better for some countries, but not so much for others, and kind of make and mold and whatever. But the fact of the matter too is there's so many different legal and governmental hoops that you're going to have to jump through. And every time you open up also the can of worms, it also invites other changes too that you really don't want, that aren't in anybody's best interest, also from other entities that really don't know much about what we do and stuff either too. So,
everything we have now is kind of a bit of a disaster. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's just a matter of getting something that sort of works.
Yeah.
The biggest thing we don't want to lose is the ability to take raptors from the wild. That's the biggest risk. I mean, they can use numerous countries in Europe where it's been outlawed as a precedent to do it here. And I think as all of our clubs, organizations, from NAF down to every state club, should encourage apprentices and other falconers to take birds from the wild, continue to do that, and make it a prerequisite for falconry in general. I mean, I don't think, and like Connecticut, they can't trap a bird from their own state, and it's it should be a necessary part of what we call falconry here in this country if we want to maintain that. I have nothing against captive bred birds, and I think it's wonderful that we can get them that way, and that also helps protect species from future loss. But the ability to take one from the wild is a very special part of falconry, and we're fortunate enough that it hasn't been taken away from us yet. But that's one thing it would really diminish my quality of life per se, right? The pursuit of happiness, for me is getting a bird from the wild and training it for falconry. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so I guess just along the same lines, does anybody else have then any other things that pop into mind that they want to add or anything before we close this up? These are kind of the hot button topics that I have pretty much heard mentioned on a pretty regular basis this whole past week within this group. And I think that there are definitely things that will need to continue to be discussed throughout the future. And, there's no, as you said, there's no personal way that we can always make whatever we think is ideal, there's no perfect perfect formula. There's
no utopian society.
No utopia. There's no perfection. It doesn't exist. We're all human beings.
Yeah, but sharing ideas like this in a forum like this is great. I mean, it's good to have perspectives from all around, and more that Falconers communicate and share those ideas, and you can flesh out really what's best for the majority.
Well, I know for me personally, like, going back to what we were talking about at Dinner Pack, it's like some kind of hybrid with how kind of like the clubs in South Africa do things and how we do things, I think would probably end up being the best overall option to appease or tweak things to satisfy the majority. But as you said, yeah, I mean, nobody's going to want a bird that they bought themselves with their own money to like be owned or dictated how it's going to be done, be flown or handled or whatever by a club or whatever also. But at the same time, having extra measures in place of standards and what kind of birds people can fly and things to kind of have that extra step of, I don't know, that extra little measure, so to speak, to maintain that standard would be nice also, so that, say, someone, couldn't necessarily achieve like a master level or whatever if they've only flown one bird or whatever and that kind of thing, kind of like what you were talking about, Eric. I mean, yeah, I don't know what the solution is either, but yeah, like you said, Paul, I mean, the only way we can continue to address things is to keep bringing them up and not just talk, but like try and actively find ways to walk the walk and not just talk the talk, and trying to make things continue to be better. And because you can't really complain about things if you aren't trying to actively find ways to solve the problems.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's going to start at conversations like these that morph into your board meetings at the local clubs levels and at the national level, and then those with conversations with your lawmakers, right? And that's how we share, and that's why we have these organizations, is really to help create a voice of a common set of principles and things that we feel are appropriate, and then work with our lawmakers to make sure that we can enact those and make sure that we can present or protect the sport as best we can within the confines of what we have in the regulations. So,
yeah, I mean, just as long as the status quo is in the best interests of everybody, I mean, okay, maintain it. But if it's not, then there needs to be active solutions, or at least active discussions working towards not just talking the talk, but walking the walk into fixing those problems too.
Right.
So,
right.
Does anybody else have anything else they want to add? I know it's starting to get, a little late and stuff. And, it's kind of funny whenever, Casey was just like, well, there's certainly just two topics I wouldn't cover. I was kind of smirking when he said it, and I didn't even want to say anything, but I was just like, no, dude. Like, I was sitting there thinking, we're easily probably going to be able to at least cover an hour out of this, and we're like an hour and 20 now.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I mean, out of just these couple of issues. So if anybody has any closing statements or thoughts, go ahead and feel free to share them real quick, and then we'll call this this new fun little experiment.
It's going to be the new thing. People are going to like it, I think. I think it's good. What do Falconers do all the time? They just BS with each other, just talk stuff. I think people are going to resonate with this a lot. My thing is, I would just say, not like advice or anything like that, but just, and I'm working on myself with this too. Just try to have a little bit of empathy for people around you, and try to view other Falconers that you see on social media, or whatever the case may be, as like somebody that's like on your team, like we're on the same team. And there's a phrase in hunting, in the hunting, space, podcast space, and social media space, of guarding the gate, they say. And guarding the gate is extremely necessary. And states where the gate wasn't guarded, meaning I'm a bow hunter. Yeah, but the guys that use the hounds, that's a little too much. I don't like that. You're not guarding the gate. You are basically betraying, the hunting culture. Just because you use a bow, and I use a rifle, they use a hound, when I use a hawk, or it's all a means of take, or trappers. You know what I mean? Oh, I don't like seeing those animals suffer. Like, yeah, I'm not gonna stand up I don't personally trap, so I'm not going to stand up and defend them. No, we need to defend each other. We need to kind of have each other's backs a little bit. And in the community, I see a lot of people where they get a little bit triggered by somebody who's brash, and I've been triggered by people. People have probably been triggered by me. And I'm working on myself and encouraging others as well to maybe have a little bit of empathy for that person and maybe try to reach out and just kind of be like, listen, man, like, I only want to see you be the best falconer you can the same way I do. I don't think you should do that, and this is the reasons why, but I'm not coming after you. I'm just politely saying something. And I've had people that I respect do that, and it stings a little bit sometimes. Like I had a guy, I posted a video of my new Goshawk on my counter, and Jimmy G, he said, he's like, put something under that bird's feet. It's slipping all over the place. What are you doing? And I kind of was like, dude, chill. But then I was like, he's kind of right. She's slipping all over the counter. So I put a nice drop cloth on my counter, and she was, and I could have been like, dude, she's fine, dude. Like, but instead I was like, you know what? He's right. She's slipping all over the place, and it's coming from somebody I know as well, which is different. But at the same time, it's still a valid thing to say. And he said it nicely. You know what I mean? But he was right. So I'm just saying, don't be so quick to be defensive. And I'm talking to myself here as well, not just to the community. So that's my last piece.
Anybody else?
From my side, I would agree with Casey here in the sense that if you find another falconer who's deficient, one of the best things you can do rather than just say he sucks is to actually just...
Even if he does.
Go out and help that person and do your best to make that person better. Because at the end of the day, it's not fair for you to criticize someone without you actually trying to resolve it. One of the things I learned from my profession is you might not be able to solve the problem, but if you can at least do your best to try to make it better, then that's, you've done your best. As long as you don't just walk and leave it, the way it is, just make the place better than before you came in. So I've done that with many falconers where I go, okay, you could do this better, but rather than going, that guy's a moron, I was like, yeah, let me just spend some time. And you know what? Let's go out together. Show him or her the right way, and let them see the light rather than calling him a moron. That is something that I think most of us do. We kind of just go, it's a freaking loser. And we all have that moment. We all have done it, and just ostracize the person. And then what does that do? It just further continues the problem, make it worse. Rather than, hey, take this person, go out in the field, and show them a different way, an alternative way. As what we were saying before, maybe you can educate that person, see a different point of view, or maybe you can understand their point and why they're doing it. And hopefully you get a better outcome rather than immediately saying the guy's a loser and ostracizing the guys.
Yeah, walking the walk instead of just talking the talk.
Interesting experiment, and perhaps maybe what social media should be used for is education.
Yeah, instead of just coming off, as opposed to, self-promotion and what some people might view that to be, and just kind of, yeah, I mean, I think there are some people that are trying to use it in that way. But yeah, I mean, your guess is as good as mine on that, like we said. But yeah, I mean, is there any particular thing or aspect of that you would like to see more as far as education for even yourself? Or
I think the podcasts that I've seen, or a lot of the podcasts, are really good and worth listening to. It's thought provoking. Actually brings listening to a lot of them brings a lot of new things to mind, and this sort of an interaction. I'm pretty sure that if it airs, that I'm going to get some phone calls on that one. Probably a lot of, man, you're an idiot.
Well, that's the thing though, is there's all kinds of issues and all facets of life in the world that we're all ignorant to. We all have ignorance. I mean, depending on, what kind of relationships you're in, you might be reminded of that every day. It is what it is. But it's what we decide to do with that. I mean, do we choose to stay ignorant? Do we choose to not do anything and let other people stay ignorant? or do we try and help other people out, or kind of like what Mac was saying? I mean, try and do things to educate and help make other people better. I mean, it's what we choose to do with the different circumstances and things that we have, I think that's going to ultimately make the bigger difference in a lot of stuff. So
what falconer that's been around for a while can say he's learned it all and is no longer ignorant? Because every year I spend in this, and sometimes my apprentices, they teach me things that I'm like, wonder why I never figured that out. I can give you a great example. One of my apprentices really likes to fly kestrels. And, I don't know, all of a sudden he's got a kestrel that's taking these 200-300 foot yard slips and catching sparrows and starlings way out. And it's like, wow, that's some really good work, man. And he goes, yeah, I hunt them on bugs. What do you mean? I go to where the big grasshoppers are. Oh, I'm still not following you. Yeah, you let them follow the big grasshoppers and they'll go forever to chase them. Okay. Oh. He goes, you got it? Yeah, I got it. Bugs die in the winter and they got nowhere else to go but to the sparrows.
Yeah, no, you never know. Like I said, I mean, I actually got a text from Teddy earlier that was like, yeah, she was reminded of another falconer that used to have her used to hunt with a kestrel also, but also was able to incorporate a dachshund, because she would actually sometimes hunt in and around outside of certain buildings where sparrows would kind of get in and under pallets and things like that, and she would use her dachshund to kick up sparrows out from behind tight quarters and things. And I'm like, well, that's a pretty good idea too. I didn't really think of that. I mean, that's kind of adds a whole new dimension if you're a micro person. I mean, and you have those kind of situations, and hey, there you go. There's another wrinkle in the brain, another scenario that you could possibly use a dog that is also already very utilized in lots of other ways. Well, there's another way. Yeah, would have never thought of it. So, just like you said, I mean, you never know, man. You never stop learning. We can't take the attitude that we know it all, or that we need to stop learning either. So, but all that being said, guys, I think this is a good note to go ahead and wrap and end on. And I hope everybody found this productive and not too painful to listen to. Like I said, something new. So, thanks for bearing with us. And yeah, y'all want to say bye to everyone?
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
All good, guys. Thanks for being a part of this, and thanks for a fun week.